Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. I'm just going to be going over a couple players at each position that I would be looking to trade for ahead of Week 4's action. We're through 3 weeks. We've got a lot of information that we can really use to help us make good, smart, and educated trades here. I personally find trading to be one of the most fun things you can do in fantasy football, and it's also just one of the best ways to make your roster better throughout the course of the season. If you truly believe you're going to win more than half of your trades, it does serve you just to make as many trades as possible, and over the course of the entire season, you should improve your team enough that you'll be a lot more competitive by the end of the year. A lot of fun for me making these videos as well. I try to make a ton of trades. I made a trade in one of my big money leagues this morning. I traded Jaden Reed and Calvin Ridley to get Chris Olave. Had a couple wide receivers on my bench I couldn't use anyway, so it was good to get that depth and turn it into a good star. But I try and make trades like that all the time. I'm making trades very constantly throughout all the leagues I'm in, and it's just fun to sort of share these with you guys as well. So hopefully you guys find these useful. If there's any players I didn't mention, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm happy to give you guys my opinions on those. Any specific trades you guys have floating around as well, let me know. I'd be happy to help you guys, give you my opinion on that. And I'll also be coming out with a video going over some players that I've been looking to trade away or sell high on. So stay tuned for that video. That should come out the same day as this one. So yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, let's get going. Start with the quarterbacks here. First player I'll talk about here is going to be Jordan Love, who I really think is a great buy low at the moment. The Packers offense has been absolutely fantastic, even without him, and that's not a bad thing for Jordan Love. This is one of the best offensive systems in the entire NFL. Matt LaFleur truly is an offensive genius, and everything's just clicking for this Packers offense and their defense in general as well, actually. But this Packers team's legit, and the schedule is absolutely fantastic coming up. You've got a relatively tough matchup here in Week 4 against the Minnesota Vikings, who have looked absolutely fantastic so far this season. So I don't want to understate that one. That could be a rough game, especially in Jordan Love's first game back. But then after that, you get the Los Angeles Rams, Arizona Cardinals, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Detroit. All four of those teams are teams that can give it up and also score a decent amount of points, aside from Jacksonville, who just looks broken right now. But there could be a lot of shootouts coming up for the Green Bay Packers, and I think that schedule is really going to lend itself towards Jordan Love putting up some really monster numbers. Quarterbacks are really struggling right now. It's hard to find weekly consistent quarterback production. I think you're going to get that out of Jordan Love for about a month straight here. So I absolutely want to get Jordan Love on my roster if I don't have one of those like top 3 or 4 guys like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels. Honestly, that might be the end of the list in terms of guys that I'm absolutely confident starting every single week. Maybe Kyler Murray's in that list as well, but I think there's a chance that Jordan Love can be a top 5 quarterback going forward, especially with this schedule. And the injury doesn't really concern me. He might be a little bit less mobile, but Jordan Love didn't really offer a ton on the ground anyway. He's still a really talented passer. This is going to be an offense that's going to push the ball downfield, and their weapons are really great. So I do want to get Jordan Love on my teams right now. Next up, we got one more quarterback I wanted to highlight, and it's going to be Anthony Richardson. And this one's obviously a little bit controversial, so I don't want to tell you guys to overpay here because I do think that there are some red flags with Richardson. He's obviously not looked very good. He's turning the ball over a ton, and the Colts offense and just generally team as a whole is struggling because of it. But I think people are very concerned about Anthony Richardson. I've gotten some questions from people about whether or not they can drop Anthony Richardson. I do not think Anthony Richardson is going to cost you all that much to get on your roster, and it's still fair to say there's not a whole lot of players out there that have much more upside than what Anthony Richardson offers on a week-to-week basis. We saw it in Week 1, even though he didn't really complete a high level of his passes. Targets the ball downfield quite a bit. He's going to push the ball downfield. He's going to run the ball quite a bit. We haven't seen the rushing volume that we'd hope to see, but that's coming. They need him to do that if they want to be a competitive team. Week 4 is still going to be tough for Anthony Richardson here. They play the Pittsburgh Steelers. He'll probably turn the ball over a few more times. Certainly not expecting a big game out of Richardson in Week 4 here, but after that he gets Jacksonville. That's a great get-right game for him. Jacksonville looks to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Tennessee, you can score on them. Miami, Houston, those are 4 straight games against teams that you can really put up points on. So I think Richardson's in line for a bit of a bounce-back month after Week 4 here, and he really is just the definition of a boom or bust quarterback play. He gives your roster a lot more upside than a lot of the quarterbacks you'd be looking at streaming to. So if you're in a matchup where you see yourself as a heavy underdog, if your team maybe is just struggling, you want to give yourself some upside, maybe overcome maybe some of the deficiencies your roster has, Anthony Richardson can do that. And then on top of that, he's got a matchup with the Giants in Week 17. I don't want to overemphasize Week 17 matchups this early in the season, but that is really great. The Giants are not a great defense, can certainly get scored on. Richardson could easily be like the quarterback 1 in Week 17, and that would make him a league winner if you can get there. So Richardson's a guy I want on my roster, even if I don't need him. I probably want to roster 2 quarterbacks with him, but I do think he's a guy that could be a big difference maker down the stretch for us. Next up, we got the first running back I'll highlight here, and it's going to be James Conner. And I just want to highlight him because obviously coming off of a bit of a dud here, only had 3 fantasy points against the Detroit Lions. And I know a lot of people are a little concerned there. I'm not concerned at all. Nobody can run in the Detroit Lions. They're one of, if not the best run defenses in the entire NFL. James Conner didn't really get targeted a whole lot. I'm not really worried about that. It's just going to come and go. It's tough to consistently guarantee passing production to the running back position here. So the fact of the matter is, James Conner is a workhorse running back on what should be a really good offense. Their upcoming matchups are pretty great as well. He gets a matchup against the Commanders this week. Commanders look pretty good as a team, honestly. It's great to see Jaden Daniels performing at a high level, but their defense is still one that we can certainly expose. Zach Moss had a great game in week 3. The Cardinals are certainly going to score a lot of points against the Commanders, and if this Commanders offense is good, we could easily see a shootout there. That's really what we want for fantasy assets in that game. Then you get the Niners, Green Bay, Chargers, Miami. None of those matchups really scare you either. So James Conner's schedule softens up a little bit. I think we're just going to be looking to fade running backs that play the Lions in general going forward. I really do view James Conner as a fringe top 15 running back going forward. I don't think he's going to cost that after week 3. Obviously, a guy that people didn't draft to be a top 15 running back, had a great first 2 weeks, but didn't perform very well in week 3. And I think people are a little bit concerned after that. I'm not at all. He's a guy that I'd look to get on my roster, and he'd really help shore up your RB2 spot if you had him. And the last running back we'll highlight here is going to be Najee Harris, who's just the clear lead running back in Pittsburgh right now. And on top of that, we saw Jaylen Warren leave week 3 with an injury. Sounds like he re-aggravated that hamstring. He's considered week to week. Tough to know when you're considered week to week, but it generally means you're not playing the following. Probably means you're going to miss a couple weeks. So we should get a few weeks of Jaylen Warren just not participating. That's going to make Najee Harris be effectively a workhorse running back. They're going to sprinkle in Cordarrelle Patterson, but it's Najee Harris's backfield. They're targeting him out of the backfield, even though he hasn't scored a touchdown yet. He's still been okay, a guy that hasn't burned you by starting him every week, and he's going to score at some point. He's obviously the goal line back in this offense. They've had a couple of short yardage touchdowns. We saw Justin Fields run one in earlier this week. Last week they threw a 1-yard fade route to their backup tight end. Like, those things are not going to happen every single week. Najee Harris is going to be the guy that gets that plunge in touchdown at some point. And Najee's historically a guy who's improved over the course of the back half of the season. 2 straight years coming into this year, we saw him be a top 10 running back over the back half of the season after sort of disappointing to start the year. The fact that he's performing at a pretty solid level to start the season makes me pretty optimistic. And then he also gets a matchup in week 4 against Indianapolis. So far, the second worst run defenses in the NFL, just behind Dallas, who's just been absolutely slacked by the Saints and the Baltimore Ravens each of the last 2 weeks. And then there's also just some upside for the Steelers offense going forward as well. We could see Justin Fields improve as he gets more comfortable in the offense. There's also potentially a quarterback change that could happen at some point. Like I said, I'd be surprised to see Russ get the starting job at some point here, but if he does, it's because the coaching staff believes he gives the offense more upside. If that happens, the offense could even improve. More touchdown upside as well in that offense. I think the offense is only going to get better over the course of the season as they play teams that just have worse defenses, or better offenses that are maybe going to be able to force the Steelers to score some points. So I think Najee's going to be a solid RB2 the rest of the way, and I don't think he costs all that right now. He's been pretty disappointing so far, and I think he'll be relatively cheap and could really shore up your RB2 spot going forward. Up next, we've got the first wide receiver I'll highlight, and it's going to be Mike Evans, who's obviously coming off of 2 straight down games here, has not been the stud wide receiver 1 that you drafted him to be in the second round, but I don't think we need to be super concerned about it. In week 3, he was shadowed all game by Patrick Surtain, who's just shut down wide receiver 1s each of the first 3 weeks. We saw him hold DK Metcalf to an absolutely abysmal game in week 1. George Pickens didn't do anything in week 2, and then Mike Evans obviously didn't get a lot done in week 3. So Patrick Surtain is one of, if not the best corners in the NFL. He's going to shut down the wide receiver 1 for teams over the course of the entire season. I think we just need to fade receivers that go against the Broncos going forward if they are the number 1 in that offense. So nothing to be really worried about there. His upcoming matchup in week 4 against the Philadelphia Eagles should be a get-right game for him. That's a game where we should expect to see a lot of points scored. We've seen the Buccaneers really have the Eagles number each of the last 2 seasons. Evans is going to be a low-end wide receiver 1 for me going forward. Obviously, a little boomer bust just because he is certainly a guy that kind of needs to score a touchdown to put up a good week. But he's a guy that can score 2 touchdowns in any given game. He's always a threat to have a 70-yard touchdown. Mike Evans is a guy that I absolutely want on my rosters. If he's your wide receiver 2, you are absolutely golden there. And I think he's going to cost you like mid-tier wide receiver 2 value right now. I don't think people are super stoked about him. Chris Godwin's obviously performed at a high level. He's not a guy that's, I think, doing what people expected because they drafted him so highly, and then seeing Chris Godwin put up those big games just makes Mike Evans owners feel even worse about it. I'm not worried here. This offense is really good. They're going to be just fine. I know they had a down week against Denver, but I think things are going to be just fine. I do want to have Mike Evans on my teams going forward. The last two wide receivers I'll highlight here are going to be both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. I don't normally recommend trading for injured players because obviously it's just tough to know when these guys are going to come back, especially guys with a bit of an ambiguous timeline like these two. But I do think the Los Angeles Rams sort of saved their season in week 3. If they'd lost against the Niners, there was obviously the potential here for this offense and this whole team in general just to spiral out of control. Fall at 0-4, 0-5, sit all their players, and you could just see an absolute disaster there. But they're still technically in second in their division. They're tied at 1-2 with the Cardinals and the Niners. The Seahawks sit at 3-0. There's no reason for the Rams to consider mailing it in at any point yet here. And I think if you're a solid 3-0 or 2-1 on your fantasy team, it makes sense to inquire about these two wide receivers. The guys that have them, they're probably 0-3 or 1-2. It makes it really tough for them to roster these guys much longer because if you start 1-3, 1-4, 0-4, 0-5, you have that kind of start. It's really difficult to dig yourself out of the hole, and fantasy managers know that. They don't want to lose games anymore if they've already lost a few, so they're certainly going to be willing to move these guys for guys that you can start. And I think you can get like Puka or Cooper Kupp for like these like low end wide receiver 2 kind of guys. Like I feel like you could offer Jaden Reed for Puka and maybe get that done. Things like that are going to be potentially accepted in your league, and if you don't need players like that, they're certainly going to give you some upside going forward. If you're not using these guys, if you've got a 3-0, 2-1 record, you've probably got depth to absorb that a little bit going forward, and then you obviously have a huge boost to your roster if and when these guys do come back for you. And the last player we'll talk about here as a trade target. It's going to be Brock Bowers, the one tight end I could find to highlight here. I don't really know if you can buy low on Brock Bowers, but I do kind of view him as the wide receiver tight end 1 the entire rest of the season. Just seems to be the focal point of this Raiders offense. Honestly, Devontae Adams is maybe the wide receiver 1 here, but he sort of seems like he's not very inspired, not really happy to be there. I could easily see that sort of just ascending into chaos for Adams going forward this season. And Brock Bowers is probably going to be the most reliable weekly asset that the Raiders have to offer. And just with how much of a disaster the entire Raiders situation is and the entire tight end situation is, I think they need Bowers, and you're going to need Bowers in your fantasy team because it's just really tough to rely on anybody in fantasy at the tight end position aside from like him, maybe Trey McBride if he's healthy, but like Andrews has been brutal. Kelsey's not been good. Sam Laporta got hurt. McBride just got hurt. Dalton Kincaid is maybe the tight end you want to own out of all these guys now that he found the end zone last week. But it's just really tough to trust any tight ends right now. And Brock Bowers is being hyper targeted. He's the best player in the Raiders offense already at this point, if you ask me. And he's coming off of a poor week 3 where the entire Raiders team just couldn't get it done. I think some people might be a little bit concerned there. You've got a rookie tight end coming off of a bad game. People might overreact a little bit. And I think you could certainly buy low on him. Even if you're paying a reasonably high price tag, I do view him as a really rock solid fantasy asset the rest of the way. So that'll do it for my trade targets this week. Up next, I'll be going over some players that I'd be looking to sell high on, so certainly stay tuned for that. That video should come out today as well, so I highly recommend you guys look at that video. If you guys do have any specific trade questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. I love helping you guys make these trades. It's always super fun to see what you guys are cooking up every single week. And then, of course, if you guys have not subscribed to the channel, there are going to be 4 to 5 videos every single week. You've got the buy low and sell high videos. There will be 2 start sit videos every week. We've got waivers, weekly recaps. We've got a live stream Sunday morning going over last minute injury updates and start sit questions you guys have. Lots of content coming out every single week, so I highly recommend you guys subscribe to the channel. That way you guys don't miss any of it. You can click the notification bells. That way you get alerted when new videos come out. And then, of course, as always, if you did make it this far in the video, just give it a thumbs up. It helps me out and helps me know that I'm doing a good job and all that. So yeah, appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.